BBC has to be an essential, independent body. We have actually built trust over that. So you can imagine that I think there's a lot of frustration and disappointment. It's not about the BBC and people like myself, but we're very sorry to the audience because we don't want to be in a position where we have flaws in the programme making. Budgets, all of those things. We want to make sure we've done a forensic analysis of the process, the editorial, and do the work. Just to go, I think the case for the BBC is stronger than ever, but the jeopardy is higher. And firstly, into the building blocks here is what we know is that in terms of support for the BBC, it is based not wholly on aren't we good for you, but are you used? And that, Chair, is why we said universality is not just about access, it's about usage as well. That's why I am obsessed with the fact that, factually, 84% of people used the BBC last week and 95% used last month. So the first thing we can do in terms of have a participatory BBC, and I am actually worried about the participatory nature of our society as we speak about it today. Do people feel involved? Do they feel involved? And the BBC has to be an essential, independent body where people can feel involved in civic society. The stakes are high. The first answer to your question is the best thing we can do is involve them in watching, listening, engaging, debating, and be part of our process. And the thing we've all got to worry about is people disengaging from that completely. Then I think we get to a set of mechanics which we're working on, which there's almost a ladder, isn't there, of different involving you could have, whether you can have comment boards all the way up to this. There's lots of ideas in the air, whether you had, specific accounts where you have, education we could make more personalised, all those things. You feel closer to the BBC and you own a stake in it. We own a lot of IP. We may touch on IP. We all own the BBC's IP. How do we make that apparent? And it may not be just a co-op mutual model. I'm not criticising that, but it might. What I do agree with is we do not want any tokenistic measures and measures that frankly can be, we know that shareholder meetings don't often have all shareholders involved.
Yeah.
And I think your concerns are valid.
It seems to me that the people who are most likely to say participate in, if there were direct elections to the board, would be the most engaged.
It is without doubt that when I spend time of a Friday evening, the people who come with most views and share their perspective on the BBC may be those who are actually more, what we might call a core audience, and I love them to bits. But actually, if we're interested in the whole of society being engaged, it's important that every mechanic is either representative or brings in those people who are on the edges of maybe our civic debate, and not just those who want to be most involved. And I think that is a central challenge to the ownership question. We all agree that building a link to the BBC and feeling ownership of it is important.
If you can enforce at the point of use that people can't access the content unless they have paid, presumably that changes the enforcement scenario in the future anyway.
Well, I think firstly, we want the licence fee enforced. End of. And those people want the vast majority of people paying expected to be enforced. And all we're debating here is the right mechanic to enforce. And we have had some challenges in the current system, as you will with any system, because no one around the table's got the perfect system. That's the one thing, if you look through the various reviews of BBC funding, everyone, to be fair to everyone, says the licence fee is not perfect, but actually we think the licence fee is the best system we've got at the moment. Okay? So what we're hearing is that debate here. And the point here is that I do think we as the BBC have to have heavy enforcement. And by the way, the other side of it, heavy is probably could be a misrepresented word. Effective, thank you. I'll take your word, thank you. So effective enforcement. Wipe heavy from the record. Effective enforcement. We know that in the imperfections of the licence fee around some of, women alone in the household, we've done a lot of work on this. There's only so far you can go on that. We also, no one wants anyone, and they don't at the moment, but in any way the dominoes falling to be an imprisonable offence, all those things. Having said that, when we look at things like civil penalties, you get to bailiffs, you get all kinds of questions. So I think we are a long way from jumping to a new place. What I want to just build to is the point that's been made, which I think is a very important one. In the short term, within a charter change. Bluntly put, I've looked at what you could get on the data side, and there is definitely potential over time for a more rational, precise enforcement system. The answer through technology, the answer is it's going to take a bit of time. So you just can't get there on the charter renewal. But longer term, I think we could chase an area which is much more rational, which is you use the BBC, you can see it. And
just one final point in terms of progressive. I think there's a strong argument, but presumably you start on the basis of everything that's currently being paid for continues to be paid for. The progression is who else can pay a bit more than they currently are. Or are you suggesting that it starts at zero again, some will pay less or none?
There's that argument which requires some debate, and I've been misrepresented. Tim Davie wants to charge more. I'm not leaping there. In terms of progression, one of the things the current progressiveness is about those who are struggling with budgets and struggling at home with their household budget, like over 75s on pension credit get a free license. What I have said is historically, and I think it was a mistake, that was paid for, that's been put on the BBC.
Comparably, though, and I say this as a champion of the BBC as well, celebrate the role that it plays, wishing actually that it was a bit more front-footed about its existence, because you have a situation where there's not a comparable per monthly spend for the people that you're talking about.
You don't have to convince me.
Well, exactly.
Great value for money.
So why aren't we hearing that? Why aren't we hearing that from the leadership of the BBC?
Well, I think
why is it forever on the back foot? Why isn't there a front-footedness to the value for money argument and how much you pay per month, and the lack of comparable membership fee? You can't get a Netflix subscription for that equivalent. What's more is actually, as somebody that wants to be able to download your material, I can't, but I could pay a bit more. But that doesn't exist because you've not yet caught up with technology that's existed for 10, 15 years elsewhere.
Well, okay, I'm going to bite on the last bit, then I'll come back. I am hugely proud, actually, that pretty much uniquely as a local media company based outside the US or China, we have fantastic digital products and download. You can download on the iPad. That's part of the deal.
You can't on a computer. You can on an iPad. You can't on a computer.
But the overwhelming, surrounding our own computer now, with respect, it's those other devices you can download on, and that's all part of your license fee. It's a fair challenge to, personally, my job to get on the front foot on the BBC, and now and again, as you know, we have numerous, as referred to the chair, top things going on the BBC. I think we are being front-footed about it. I'm talking all the time about the value. If you talk about your license fee communication, if you look at what we're delivering, what I would say is overwhelmingly it is about behaviour and usage, and then you do what you're talking about. But if you haven't got the former, it's no good telling everyone we've got all this stuff if they don't use it. And we are obsessed with that. This is what the research is telling me.
Right.
And I take your challenge. We'll be as front-footed as you like, and I think we're absolutely on manoeuvres on that.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Jim. Tom?
Maybe from sources of income to streams of expenditure, what's happening with your spending on high-end TV to compete with the global streamers, and does that result in difficulties on the amount you have to spend on content for other genres?
Significant challenges, and in some ways we are defying gravity. As you know, we have lost, in real terms, we've lost a lot of our income over the last 10 years. Currently, and I'm thankful for it, we're in a 4-year period of CPI. The problem, of course, is high-end television as you know, inflation has been beyond that. So the answer to this question is that is probably one of the main preoccupations of the executive team, in terms of how do we ensure that we preserve local services, preserve all the various things we think are so valuable to the BBC, but also we know that when people, linking directly to the earlier conversation, when they look at how they ascribe value for the license fee, if you ain't got those big dramas, you ain't got those big moments, you don't get there. So the short answer to your question is we are working extremely hard in a couple of areas. Funding, working really hard in terms of co-production. We've done that for years, but we're having to work extremely hard to do that, to maintain 30-plus dramas, our natural history, and all the things we're doing. That is getting increasingly difficult, and at the edges we're beginning to see some real challenges, particularly around very high-end drama pricing, which is the Peter Kaminsky, Wolf Hall, you've heard it here. Yeah, that is where. So there are a few titles. They're not overwhelming. But if I talk to my content team, it's not lists and lists, but there are a couple of titles now where you go, sorry, we can't get to the £5 to £10 million an episode. I would say we're not out of the game. We're not out of the game, by the way. We're doing very well. We're the biggest, you think Blue Lights, you think all these shows, they deliver great audiences, and not everything has to be a 5 to 10 million budget, but that is getting more tense, and it does put pressure on other areas that don't quite deliver as much audience impact. But that's the job. The job for the top team is to make those choices and ensure we're on the front foot delivering the value.
So you talked about what you're doing in terms of co-production and trying to do that. What could the government do to help the BBC make more high-end British drama?
Well, I think we've just got to keep looking at, we're very appreciative of the tax credit regime.
Is it high enough?
You're talking to someone who makes television programs, so of course it's not high enough. But I think the threshold numbers could go, comedy. There's a number of areas where with the government, I think, look, we need to nurture this industry. And the BBC is one set of discussions, but we have huge issues beyond the BBC. One of the things I'm worried about is, when I'm visiting many of the cities and areas around the UK, we're often the only show in town. And we've got very significant unemployment among freelancers. So we're going to have to do more to continuing to attract investment. And we've got the skills. We've got, not all the skills, sorry, but we've got the craft heritage. We've got people who can make these programs. We need to drive more volume in.
What about streamers, Levy?
I'm open-minded to it. Sorry, the reason I'm sitting, I just need to see exactly how that works. I'm going to actually meet Peter Kaminsky very shortly. Actually, I'm going to talk about it. I think the idea that contribution is flowing back into the UK is a good idea. Just exactly how that works and where it goes, I think, requires a bit more debate. Firstly, I'd say nothing's more important than we're trusted. And we have actually built trust over that. So you can imagine that I think there's a lot of frustration and disappointment. It's not about the BBC and people like myself, but we're very sorry to the audience because we don't want to be in a position where we have flaws in the programme making. And overall, I am proud of the way we're covering some of these polarised, fiendishly difficult events where many of our journalists, as you know, are under enormous pressure, ferocious lobbying, and it's been extremely difficult. But in this case, there are flaws. When people say to me, well, you had to have external challenge. We do get external challenge. I get external challenges reported on from various institutions and other people questioning our programming. And it's appropriate. I'm editor-in-chief. And if someone says, you've got a problem here, it's quite right that I go and ask the teams and say, have we got a problem? And dig into it. In this case, we got challenges.
Organisations were...
Various challenges. But, I think overall we had it depends what you call. Sorry, I'm not being evasive. I think on the log this morning there's about 500 odd complaints about the film being biased against Israel. We had about 1,800 wanting to put the film back, but then we have some serious complaints from various parts of the. We have various complaints from different people in terms of and various organisations in terms of their concern about this programme. There were specific concerns, as you know. We've been highly transparent in my view in terms of, and that's how I try to deal with these things, in terms of saying there was a specific question around, bear with me, around the father of the boy. And as we dug into it, we've been totally transparent, we found out that we were not told. Now, to your point, you can debate the materiality of that, you can talk about, but in my view, if you're asked a number of times and that question was not answered, and from our side, and we have fantastic teams, by the way, and I certainly think under the pressure they're under, you've got to understand some of these situations, but the level of curiosity you ask, is there anything more I know? That is basics. And at the end of the day, as editor-in-chief, I have to be secure, not only editorially where the film's at, but the making of that film. And at that point, quite quickly, I lost trust in that film. Therefore, I have took the decision quite quickly to take it off iPlayer while we do this deep dive. That's what's happened.
So it could come back after editing.
Questions
of accuracy.
I'm not ruling anything out. What the chair has said is actually right. Is Do I think this is a valid?
Was it accurate? Was there coercion involved? Those kind of things.
That is why I think we've done a good first initial bit of initial work that tells you more than enough to say tells me more than enough that there are flaws. But I want to do a forensic analysis of there's a lot of things floating around in terms of budget, all of those things. We want to make sure we've done the forensic analysis of the process, the editorial, and do the work.
You've had to make a value judgment in removing the film from iPlayer. So is it right you don't agree with the 500 to 1,000 artists that have said that this breaches regulations on regulatory, legal and ethical obligations because you've removed it in the first instance? So you disagree with that argument?
No, this one to me, and it was a very difficult decision.
Okay.
Because I think representing some of you know this is stories we want to tell, and this is a very hard situation for us.
It may
bear with me. So and also we have got a rich and important current affairs history in this area where we've got programs we're very proud of. As well as saying, this documentary maker has got a great reputation of making some fantastic documentaries. The issue, I don't think we're in breach of anything, is editor-in-chief, very simply, if I can't trust the program, it's nothing to do with one side or the other. And this is where it's being misrepresented. It really is. And by the way, if you think we bow to lobbies from either side, come and spend a day with me. We don't. We try and navigate a course sensibly, rationally, based on fair, balanced journalism. And everyone has a view on it. What we did, and I did, and it was a very tough decision, was to say, at the moment, looking people in the eye, can we trust this film? In terms of how it was made, the information we've got, and that's why we made the decision. It's a simple decision in that regard.
But why is it a retrospective decision?
Because we had new information.
But the BBC, according to, to show some even-handedness on questioning wise, the BBC repeatedly raised concerns about the child's family links to Hamas. I mean, I would, again, that's not marking homework. That's credit to the independence of the news organisations.
Absolutely.
But why weren't those suspicions not properly investigated or reported? There is a requirement under Section 19 of the Terrorism Act to do so. And shouldn't the counter-terrorism police now be investigating whether BBC funds have reached Hamas, either through payment to the father or the sister, as I understand, has also received money?
Yeah, let's segment I need to segment the issues slightly, which is that first decision was not related. Payments were not the thing being debated at that point. That it was a simple fact of the relationship. Yeah. So there was nothing at that point. I did not need information on the payments. It was enough to say that we had asked about. Remember, the question was, is there a relationship with Hamas in any way? And to the point, you can talk about the looseness of the relationship, but that should have been declared. Yeah. And to your point, transparency was lacking. Exactly right. And at that point, I look people in the eye and say, can we trust this film at this point? Not is it a valid area of journalistic endeavour? It's not a criticism of the wider newsroom. It's absolutely, can we trust this program? That's when we take it off iPlayer. Okay. Then you say, okay, let's have a look. Let's look in detail at this. Let's look at the funding. Now, it's worth saying that, just to be utterly clear, the BBC is only made, as I understand it, I want to make sure that I'm safe, bluntly, because we need to do this deep investigation. But as I understand it today, the BBC's only made one payment, which was for a licence fee to the programme maker, the independent, to make the film. The initial assessment of the economics, and we need to do the detailed work, showed that there was a small payment to the sister. Because the boy, and it's totally normal payment, which is the boy recorded the narration and went to a studio to do it. Okay? Now, we just need to understand how that works. We are very, very clear about our obligations in terms of the law and what parties we have to. I don't want to get into too much detail, as you would understand, but we do not need any prodding. My view is absolutely clear, is if we've got obligations to make sure everyone is aware. And by the way, what we're aware of is in the paperwork that we've issued in our statement, and absolutely everyone should be aware of that, including any authorities that need to be. We don't need, that's absolute transparency. That's where we are.
Do you think you will the scope of your inquiry confirm if the money paid for the documentary ended up with Hamas?
Part of the work is to do a forensic analysis of exactly what happened to the money. Yeah,
But are you asking that question?
of course. And it's
So
worth saying,
then we were
it's worth saying
expecting
the independent production company to represent them fairly. They have written to us very clearly that they say no money has gone to Hamas, but we absolutely have to do that work, and the answer is yes, of course. As far as you can,
Yes, I mean, it's fair to assume if the family of a senior Hamas leader is paid, that money goes into the.
let's deal with the facts. Assuming anything at this point, I'm telling you the facts I know, and that's what I can stand on. And I've told you what I know, which is a limited amount of money was paid to the sister, is what I am being told at this point. 100% agree. The audience out there, at the end of the day, this is about trust in the BBC.
Yeah.
But we don't. The editorial control. At the end of the day, the editorial responsibility for anything we've published is on the BBC.
Yeah.
Having said that, you can explain, if you're in my job, you want to understand why the failings happened, and that is clearly there were serious flaws on both sides. Now, then you get to the question: how can you absolutely sure that the right questioning, everything happens, so you don't get that problem again? Yeah, or you could be oversight. That's the direct answer to your question.
One of the questions I did ask was, how did this program come to be? Was it an idea that came within BBC, and then they thought which company could execute it, or whether they could do it in-house? This idea came from the company. So it wasn't a question of subcontracting. It's a question of commissioning. I can have an idea, I can try and sell it to the BBC. It's an idea, and that's how commissioning works.
Mr. General, you got to the heart of this. You said there are unanswered questions. So what we want to know is, was that because the questions were not comprehensive enough and not followed up effectively, or was it an active deception by this production company on their part to give you misleading answers?
I've got no evidence of the latter, but that's part of what we need to do in the review.
So as it stands, that's still a question.
Absolutely. Well, we just need to get into the detail of exactly why those questions weren't answered.
But isn't it important as well? I mean, to answer Rupert's point earlier, is there a way of making this film safe, that it can be seen by everyone so they can make their own minds up? I mean, from what I've seen, there's an 11-year-old Zachariah who helps paramedics at Al-Aqsa Hospital in this film, who does that rather than staying with his family because his family haven't got any food or water. And he says he's seen 5,000 people dead. That's an 11-year-old. That's not the narrator of the movie. That is actually one of the people in the movie. Surely that's a valid voice to be heard by the BBC licence fee payer if it can be done in a safe way. Surely it's possible to edit this film so you remove the narrator, in other words, the point of contention, and you still allow the children's voices to be heard by everyone. Then the licence fee payer can see from themselves what they make.
Certainly we, as I said right at the front, there was absolutely legitimate journalism to be done here, and the voices of those children and children in Gaza is absolutely something we need to hear. And that's what makes it, frankly, frustrating to where we are. You're going to get the same answer from me because it's appropriate, which is we need to do the work and understand the questions and then make that decision. There are clearly considerations here, and we've got to do our work calmly in the midst of, as I say, ferocious noise around us, by the way. I just want to say one thing, which is I just want to reinforce that the vast majority of our journalists are doing a tremendous job. So, but we're only as good in this job as, the weakest link, as it were. And this is damaging, but I do want to say that overall trust in BBC News, and we've seen it remains very high. We've grown it over the last year. So it's important we're not losing all context here. This was a serious failing, but we have trust numbers that we're very proud of. We're the most trusted brand in the world. And part of what we do to earn that trust, and believe me, it's never an easy day, is actually be highly transparent and go through enormous processes when we fail like this to show how we're going to fix it. And we're very transparent about that. And I think that is part of our process.
Very quickly, and then we're moving on to Paul.
I don't know if it's a view I share it with Paul, but personally, if to conclude on this is to redact the original programme, I don't support that. I think in the interest of transparency, we should see the thing as it was supposed to be and how it went out initially. You could, of course, redact and choose to emphasise and hear different aspects of that testimony. And I absolutely concur with Dr. Shah's point about the validity of seeing this war through a Gazan child or indeed an Israeli child. And I look forward to that documentary being commissioned. But I don't think this is about redacting.
It is about, sorry, it's really important. I agree with the thrust of that. It is about whether something meets our editorial guidelines and our standards. End of. Yeah. It's not about a position on either side. It is about whether it meets our editorial standards. And part of that is the making of the programme, not just what's on air. And we need to go through that work.
Okay, good. We need to make some progress now. Back to Rupert, please.
Just, sorry, made me think, would you ever do a documentary? I think Al Jazeera, I've not seen it, but I've been told about it, did one with body cams of IDF soldiers, of some of the things that they captured.
There's not an area of scope which I say we wouldn't make a documentary. It's a question of what the editorial controls. It doesn't look like the easiest compliance journey, that one, but I think we would absolutely, we report without fear or favour, and we want to get to the truth. So the answer is we'll look at any proposal, or our journalists are out there looking at those kind of. I mean, the issue is where editorial control sits, and it's worth saying part of the challenge is here, obviously, journalists on the ground in Gaza and what access we've got, making sure we're not being minded. All those things are really fair concerns. So it just depends on the situation.
And I do tend to think the international news is often a bit flavour of the month. So we're talking about this at great length. Yesterday, I think there was an aid blockade in Gaza. That doesn't seem to have been on the evening news yesterday. I heard it on the Today programme in the morning. It's very Ukraine at the moment.
I think we're doing a great job on our coverage, and I think there's appropriate prominence, if I may.
So, for example, you put me in touch with BBC Bangla. I asked when I came back, could I go on Dateline UK and describe that? The programme's been axed. So I do feel there's a shrinking space for international news, the way that you've restructured your news channels and things. But look, my last one was really about domestic political bias, and you know that I've questioned you on this before. I think my point is really, when politicians appear, if we go on TV, we're captioned with our party label, and that is transparent and clear. But on some of your panels, I know you always say that we've got a team in Question Time who's scrupulously fair about this, but we know from not just Question Time, any questions, Politics Live or Daily Politics, whatever it's called, you often get these right-wing Tufton Street think tank people, and that's not totally clear. Or you get owners of right-wing print media. The print media in this country, again, is shrinking. Every day you do the papers, you hold up the headlines, 70% of those are right-wing conglomerates, Murdoch, the other one, whatever it's called, the Rothermere one, whatever it's called. So, sorry, I can see you smirking, Tim. Is this amusing?
Got journalists. You just keep going. Apologies. It was just a minor surreal moment. Apologies.
No, but for example, okay, we have a working population in this country of 33 million. 6.5 million of those are trade unionists. I raised this last time. Why do we not have trade union leaders? That is 20% of our workforce. Those people are absent. We know that there is the Spectator-funded GB News. Often licence payer money is used to create these culture war type scenarios where you take contributors from GB News, give them a platform on your panel shows. When can we have a bit more balance on your panel shows? Ofcom says in a modern democracy, people should have access, citizens should have access to a range of views, and it seems very skewed to the right.
I think we're working extremely hard. I thought you might ask me about Question Time, and I asked in the new series where we are. Labour 17, Conservative 17, Lib Dems 8, Reform 3.
Non-party people.
Bear with me if I may. If I may. Loosely, people of the left, if that is a descriptor that still holds, or people of the right, 11 each, and so-called neutral 7. I can provide the data. We're working extremely hard on this, and I think our record speaks for itself.
So whenever it's an academic, it's Matt Goodwin. He has known views.
But I can give you the. I'm trying to be led by the data.
Also, from 2014, it's Duma's statistic from this committee. Between 2014 and 2023, 5 journalists appeared on Question Time most. Do you know what publication they're all from? The Spectator. So I mean, it is a very
I just think we need to be. I think we need to be led by the data. Simple as that. Oh,
Right, that's it. I want to move on.
data is different.
If you can provide us with that data, we'd love to have it. Thank you very much. Let's keep with you, please, Matt Paul.
Can we shift on to local radio stations? Obviously, you've had major cuts to local radio stations. You have to make savings in recent years. Have you now got an up-to-date assessment of the impact of that transition from local services from radio to online?
Indeed, and I thank you for the question. As we know, it was a very difficult period as we moved money around within the local budget. As you know, and you're well versed on this, we didn't take overall money out of local; we kept it cash flat. I think I'd pay tribute to all the local teams because it's been extremely tough, but it was the right decision to keep all 39 local radio stations in England. Do make those changes in afternoons and a few other programs which have been difficult. The specific answer to your question is we've seen pretty much flat radars this quarter. I remember that question last time, which I would come back and give you that. But critically in online, we've seen a very significant increase. So about 40% increase. And the reason is, and this is why I was so obsessed by this, and it was not easy, is we were only producing a very, very low number of local online articles a day. We now produce a reasonable amount. The 11 investigative teams are beginning to pay dividends as well, and hopefully you can get on the ground as committee members and see their work, because it's really impressive. So I'm very proud of the local work. I wish I'd had more money and kept everything going, but I think us moving money around, and it was very difficult. This is the joy of the BBC. Local radio is precious, but moving money around has seemed to have delivered good results for us. The other thing we've made work, which I'm proud of, is if you go to our news app now and you're logged in, you get your local news right up there. And that's made a big difference to those teams, and their journalism is being seen by more and more people. So, yeah, I'm bullish about it. I wish we had more money for local. I think one of the biggest questions we're going to get to the Charter is what is the right provision for reporting locally, because we know how stressed the business models are of the commercial operators around us. I say that with no glee.
Yeah. I want to press you a little further on that. The Local Democracy Reporting Service has obviously been a success in many ways, and it fills the gaps where a lot of local newspapers have sadly died. I say this as someone who used to work in a local newspaper, but you've filled the gap. However, there's an increasing demand for that local news precisely because of devolution. You've got local buying authorities, elected mayors. Are they being scrutinised? They're spending billions of pounds of money, not central government, but locally. So there's a need and a demand for more of that local democracy reporting service. Are you anticipating in your charter review sort of bid that actually you can expand that surface?
I think it's definitely one of those things we need to... We're a bit early. But of the 165 reporters, thank you to them. I think they're doing a tremendous job. Overall, it's a very positive readout. But there are things to learn in terms of just how they spend their time, how we make the journalism flow across the system, who's using it, is it getting through the bigger commercial players to the smaller commercial players. I think we need to look at all of that from a positive perspective. I would like to see as part of the Charter an upweighting of local provision. In terms of how that works. Now, whether that is LDRS expansion, looking at other things we can do. I think that's absolutely the heart of the Charter. I welcome ideas on this because I think there's a number of views, by the way, on how you tackle that.
Yeah.
And our vision is not for the BBC to be the only show in town.